Our speaker today is Anne Perrone, and she has worked for a long time with the Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice on sanctuary issues of sanctuary, in particular on their Latin American task force. She is going to talk with us today. Here's the title: Theological Foundations of Immigration and Refuge Care from Within the Christian Tradition. Does this sound familiar? Yes.
I think that was Emmeline's.
Well, all right.
But I'll talk on it.
Okay. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to her before I say anything else that's wrong.
Well, thanks, Ron, and thanks to Bob for setting up our tech stuff. And thanks to all of you for being here. If at any time you can't hear me, I can talk louder. And if you wanted to, move in, you can, or if you want to stay out, whatever, feel free to move. I'm really happy that Zion Lutheran Church is taking a look at sanctuary and what it means, and as I understand it, taking it under consideration for your congregation. And there are many reasons why for any congregation. I do a lot of interfaith work, so that from whatever tradition you come from, but I think particularly today we can talk as fellow Christians from the Christian tradition to take on some of the major ways in which people are really hurting in our world due to really unjust systems, and taking some kind of a stance, of what I would call a prophetic stance, which is a large part of what sanctuary does, as well as actually offering some protection to some people. And that's one of the things that I would really like you to go away with, that in a way, standing up for justice is as important for us and our souls as it is for any way we would alleviate suffering of others. So it's a twofold mission, if I could say that. So I would like to ask two things. One is, I actually gave this same presentation in the spring here upstairs for an evening event. Were any of you here that evening? Probably. You were, okay. So, but you won't mind repeating. Okay, I just needed to know if I would be repeating for too many people too much. Okay, that's great. Were most of you here for Emmeline's talk last week? Yes? Okay. And I'm sure there'll be some overlap. But I would like to ask, I'm not going to attempt to answer the questions right now, but I would like to ask you if either from Emmeline's talk last week or from your own thoughts on congregational sanctuary, if you have a burning question that you're coming today with, and I'd like to take them and write them down, and we'll see if this presentation answers them, and if not, I will do that after. So any burning questions you have about, you've been thinking about? Yes.
The arguments or the discussion worldwide about immigration and refugee status often talks about cultural differences, how to absorb new cultural influences into a settled community that's been there for eons. And is it good? Is it bad? How do we do it? Do we want to? I'm interested in how that discussion can be opened up.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Completely 180 degrees. My interest is in knowing what can we do to help encourage people to stand up against police departments who stop for a traffic violation or just because they don't like the color of the person driving the car and call immigration. What can we do about that?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
I guess what's happening locally with immigration
Okay.
and also illegal human trafficking, and how we can help.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. Okay. So actually, all three of these questions we can try to talk about. They're all of them to some degree or other outside of the scope of sanctuary, which is what I think that you want to talk about, but it's all related. And being a sanctuary people is much more than just offering sanctuary. And so I'd like to open with a prayer that, even though I know most of you just come from prayer, and the name of the prayer, the title is Becoming Sanctuary People in Today's World. And this is adapted from Sister Diana Ortiz. She is a Catholic sister, a nun, who as a rather young nun in her 30s was working as a missioner in Guatemala. She was teaching literacy to young children. She was abducted from the convent grounds by the military dictatorship in Guatemala, and she was brutally tortured. She survived physically. She had a torturous many years of trying to recover psychologically and emotionally, and she became a staff member, a director of an anti-torture group. I think that was part of her healing. And this is adapted from the prayer that she wrote, thinking about sanctuary now, the new sanctuary movement. Women, men, and children of generations past and present have suffered unthinkable acts of violence, discrimination, cruel separation. Time and again we shout, never again. Never again will we become a people of indifference. Today we recommit to transforming the words never again into genuine action by becoming sanctuary people. Let us become a voice for justice. Let our hands welcome the stranger and the neighbor in our lands. Let the blindfolds on our eyes that shade our vision be removed so that we can see our brother and sister in the refugee, the immigrant, the orphaned. Let our feet walk side by side with the tired and weary who journey treacherous roads in search of shelter. Let our tears anoint those we meet with tender care. And let us join with generations of yesterday, today, and tomorrow and proclaim with one voice, injustice, exclusion, bigotry, never again, not in our time. Amen. The prayer is a wonderful prayer, but it also gives us a sense of what becoming a sanctuary people is. Becoming a sanctuary congregation is one thing, and we're going to talk about that. But we need to become sanctuary people, and it involves the very things of wondering what the police are doing with people who are driving brown or in our city, and what's happening locally with immigrants locally and worldwide. How do we absorb people who are different? We say they're our brother and sister, But how do we do that? So all of this is part of it, and I'm glad that Zion is with that. This is something that is just happening that I want to let you know, because the words "never again" in this poem, the time that we have heard most about it, perhaps, since I've worked so much in Central America and in Latin America with the military dictatorships and the horrors of violence that have sent many people to our borders. That is one of their slogans: "Nunca más," never again will we let this happen. What happened, for instance, in Guatemala with was genocide of the Mayan people, 200,000 people killed in that during the 1980s. But it is really the Jewish people who, after the Holocaust, that was their cry, never again. And right in our community, Temple Beth Emeth, you know, that's on Packard, that is housed with St. Clair Episcopal as Genesis. Their rabbi is Josh Winston. And so I'm going to read this because this is what he sent. In response to the massive growth of a teen tent prison along the border, the U.S.-Mexico border in Texas, warehousing 1,600 plus immigrant youth, Rabbi Josh Winston of Temple Beth Emeth, Ann Arbor, and rabbi friends in Ohio and California are planning a multi-faith pilgrimage to the teen tent prison in Tornillo, Texas, as a movement of witness and demands for immigration justice and change. Beginning Tuesday, November 13th in Ann Arbor, from Ann Arbor, but also from other places, the caravan will travel city to city, building momentum and concern. At each city, there will be a media event. The caravan arrives in El Paso, Texas on Friday, November 16th in a multi-faith action of witness and protest. So that is what, as Josh told me, actually he put this on a Facebook post when he had some photos from an aerial view seeing where the plans were to build this camp, this detention camp for immigrant youth. And he said, these are children. And he said, I asked myself the question, what do we Jews mean when we say never again? And so what he wants it to mean, what it's going to mean for him and for those, and he calls all of us to join in this in one way or another, is to put our feet and our bodies in action. And this caravan is to protest and to bear witness and to protect the children. That's what we mean with never again. And I think that's a good larger context for what we're going to see today. Washtenaw Congregational Sanctuary. If I'm standing here, can everybody see? Okay, great. So there's a Wicker Washtenaw Interfaith Coalition for Immigrant Rights has been around for 10 years. I have been involved since the beginning. And the Latin America Task Force of Interfaith Council has been around for many decades. They came together. Wicker, who tries to meet the needs of undocumented immigrants who are in danger of deportation and or had their loved one ripped away by ICE and gone into detention and they don't know where they are, or we try to accompany them here in Washtenaw County. For Latin America Task Force, that I have also worked with, looks at what's happening in the countries, at least the ones in Latin America, and of course we're getting immigrants from many, many parts of the world, but from Latin America, what is happening in their countries that cause them to leave homeland, language, better weather than in Michigan, and often leaving their families behind. What in the world would induce someone to to become so desperate as to do that and come far away to places where they're not really wanted. So we came together a year ago, February, so I guess we're at a year and a half now, to form Washtenaw Congregational Sanctuary to do one more thing that would be helpful to undocumented immigrants who are in danger of deportation due to our unjust immigration policies. So this is what I'm going to try to cover as quickly as I can today. A little bit about the crisis and some personal stories of people right here in Washtenaw County or nearby that this could affect, and then what sanctuary is, faith connection, and elements to consider. So again, I don't know if Emmeline went over this very much, but I'm not going to read this to you, but you can, I think everyone can read it themselves. Just take a look at, just see what's happening in Michigan in terms of immigrants. And this one is
to read it because
okay, I will. This is just some statistics. Michigan has 24,214 foreign students who contribute $657.6 million to the state economy. This is part of the reality of immigrants. The state of Michigan's economy has $657.6 million more because of that. 37.8% of foreign-born adults have a bachelor's degree or higher. When we ask who are the immigrants, this is part of who they are. 86.4% of Michigan's children with immigrant parents are U.S. citizens. That's who and so that when a parent gets ripped away into detention and deportation, these are U.S. citizen children left without a parent. And 86.6% of children with immigrant parents are English proficient. This is their home. They have been living here. The Ann Arbor News. For many immigrants and their family, both documented and undocumented, this past year has been a difficult one as the federal government has stepped up immigration enforcement efforts under President Trump. In Michigan, more than 2,200 people were targeted for deportation in fiscal year 2017 and placed into removal proceedings in U.S. Immigration Court in Detroit. There were nearly 4,400 cases pending in the court at the end of the year. So this is part of the crisis. I was there the first time that Wicker was formed 10 years ago. That was under President Obama. There's been a huge immigration problem since before the Obama era, and it was not good under his leadership. We were having to fight deportations or trying to fight deportations and trying to accompany families who had had loved ones ripped away. But it has become so much worse. And I think that all of us remember last summer and the crisis of the children and families being turned away at the border. It's still continuing. It's not in the news anymore, but it continues. So we're at more of a crisis than ever before. I don't think, these are just a couple of graphs, the first one and this one, that just shows with the red line the increase in already stepped up enforcement. People who have lived in as immigrants, undocumented immigrants in our county and other places have been living for years, paying taxes, sending their children to school, working in our communities, doing many. Has anyone had a roof job done recently? It's immigrants doing them, I assure you, as well as we know in the kitchens downtown and in the hotels all around. And they are working and raising their families, and they are our neighbors. And yet, all of a sudden, they can be whisked away. They can be detained. I'm going to take questions later. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're listening. And this is the uptick in just in the last year for arrests. detainments. So this is Wicker's mission, which is to provide culturally sensitive and supportive urgent response to raid detainees and their families, to educate the targeted and allied communities, to impact local governmental policies, like do our police and sheriff call ICE if they stop someone driving who cannot produce the papers, and to work toward humane national immigration reform that provides a pathway to citizenship for all undocumented people. So that's what Wicker has been doing, and these are the areas that they work in, especially urgent response, education, community organization, and political action. We have done rallies to help stop deportations. We have helped people find lawyers. We continue to do that all the time. And we buy food and diapers to get them through the next week if the breadwinner has been taken away. This is Lourdes Salazar. I don't know if she looks familiar to you, but she was her case was pretty well covered in the Ann Arbor News, what's left of it. Lourdes had been here over 20 years. She had 3 children. Her oldest was 19. It's all born in the United States. She says she is now at Michigan State, the oldest daughter. The kids always lived here. And 7 years prior, her husband was picked up and was deported. And so for 7 years, she was a single parent of the 3 children, working. She owned her own business. She developed and owned her own business of cleaning homes. She was employing other people in her business. She worked hard, and she every year would get permission to stay, and then she didn't. And we as Wicker, we went all out, all that we could possibly do. Went to our senators and our congresspeople and held rallies. This is a rally in front of the mayor spoke at the rally, among many others, many religious leaders in our community. Letters were written. The Jesuit provincial of the entire USA wrote letters to ICE, and she was deported last year.
Is she okay?
She is okay. She's in Mexico, and the work she has found, and 2 of her children went with her. The MSU students stayed here, but I think one of the children will come back. They just don't, it's really hard for them in school. They don't even have the Spanish skills for school. They have the Spanish skills to talk to their mom, but not for doing school. One of them may come back. This is blank, because I had to take it out of the slideshow. This is a man, and he has a name, and I want to honor his name, but I'm going to call him Pablo. That's not his name. But his attorney has advised him. He was willing to step up and let his picture and his story be told. But because he is going to court in a couple of months, in November, to put forward his asylum claim, his attorney advised him that he should not be doing any public advocacy on anything that could jeopardize his chances. So Pablo came here from Honduras. Honduras is a country in enormous human rights crisis. I can talk to you a whole other time about what's happening there. And unfortunately, and this is the part we miss this many, many times, our country is supplying, that's our tax dollars, supplying military, intelligence training, aid, weaponry, and to the police as well, to a country where the military and police are repressing their own people and are major perpetrators of the human rights violations in that country. When people ask, why should we take these people? How can we? We, unfortunately, and in many, many cases, have helped create the situations from which people have to flee. And so Pablo fled his country, and he has been here for 14 years. Once he was here, he married. He belongs to a church in Ypsilanti that is a very cohesive congregation. He and his wife and 3 children, 3 U.S. citizen children, are very involved in their church. He is one of the most honest, upright people that I know. And his parents, his mom and dad, and his brother back in Honduras have been threatened with death to the point where his brother really can't leave the house. And his parents, they had to literally leave their home and go to a neighboring community for a while until they felt it was somewhat safe to come back, and he can't leave the house because of the what's called gang violence. And it is gang violence, but it's gang violence that in a way that we don't quite understand it. It has seeped into areas of the government and of the police, and many of the gangs are agents. They're like paramilitaries for the police and military. And yet, a couple of years ago, Pablo was to be deported. And again, we did everything that I just described for Lourdes for him. And this was still under the Obama administration. At the very last minute, I mean, it was the night before he was to get on the plane to be deported when he got a stay, what they call a stay of removal, that gave him time to enter his asylum case. These are the people we're talking about that could be deported back to very dangerous situations in his case. Maybe you have heard about these people. And right now, I don't have my notes in front of me, and I am very ashamed to say that I have forgotten their names, but this is the wife and this is the husband. They're from Albania, and they came many years ago with a visa. Their visa has run out. In the meantime, his wife has MS that has gotten progressively worse, and now she is only in the chair. And he is her sole support and caregiver. And they were scheduled to be deported. And they also have fears of returning to their country. She cannot return. There is not the medical support there that she needs. And he faced deportation, and he had for many, many years, again, a humanitarian visa that he could stay to care for his wife. But under this current administration, under this new enforcement, you have to go. And so they have been living for the better almost a year in Central United Methodist Church of Detroit in Sanctuary. It was their only option, they felt. Rather than be separated, have him deported, who would care for her, etc. They also have a U.S. citizen child. These are the kinds of folks that might need sanctuary, and they're there. Central United Methodist Church is not only offering 2 people sanctuary, and of course their child. They're also being sanctuary people by speaking out and standing up and keep putting this injustice in front of everyone. And that's a big part of what we do as Congregational Sanctuary. It's a public act for a congregation to have someone come and live there. And it's a public act for those congregations who want to support that, become a supportive congregation, who perhaps will not give residence in their congregation, but they will give support in health care, because this is people that she can't leave because she's in the chair. I'm sure she can go to her doctor appointments. She's free to come and go. He is not. It's not an easy life, but it's a desperate move.
Why, is she a U.S. citizen?
No.
Why is she able to leave and not?
Because she does not have a deportation order, because she's allowed to stay because of her medical condition. At least that.
Yeah.
At least that.
She entered the hospital.
So congregational sanctuary, very simply, is a safe place from unjust laws. So it provides protection for an immigrant, a refugee, or an asylum seeker, it could be an individual or a family, who is in danger of unjust persecution and or imminent threat of deportation, by offering them physical residence within the walls of the community, as Central United Methodist has done, as 3 congregations in Ann Arbor are ready and willing to do. Sanctuary is one of the most ancient traditions we have in the Judeo-Christian tradition. During the 1980s, over 500 congregations provided safe haven for refugees from Central America. 2 of them here in Ann Arbor Friends Meeting and the Unitarian Universalist Church. One had a family from Honduras during that time, and one had a family from El Salvador. And if any of you have had Pilar's tamales, thank you. Tamales, anyone had any? Ever? Yes, Sharon has. That's a business out, just down the street from you, on Liberty, right? Sylvia herself, the owner, was in Sanctuary, and her aunt Pilar was in Sanctuary here in Ann Arbor, which is how they all came to be here. So now we have today's new sanctuary movement, and it's a response to the recent changes in U.S. immigration policy and practice. It's and we talk about congregational sanctuary, and there are other sanctuary initiatives, Sanctuary City, Sanctuary Campus, all of which are great, but Washtenaw Congregational Sanctuary is just working on this type of sanctuary of offering safe haven in congregational buildings. Across the U.S., more than 800 religious congregations are engaged in today's sanctuary movement. These are the zip codes where people have pledged to offer sanctuary. So there are congregations in Michigan that are participating. There are 3 in Kalamazoo, 6 in Detroit, 12 in Washtenaw County, and I will tell you who they are. All Saints Episcopal in East Lansing, and also Cristo Rey Catholic Congregation, since this was put together, also has declared sanctuary. So the Church of the Good Shepherd, which is a United Church of Christ church here in Ann Arbor Friends Meeting, and the Unitarian Universalist Congregation are all what we call level 1 sanctuary congregations. They will offer residence to folks. Then we have 9 other congregations that are supportive congregations that will, when they have someone, will help them. First Congregational United Church of Christ of Ipsy, First United Methodist of Ann Arbor, the Wesley Foundation, which is associated with the Methodist Church, the Episcopal Church of the Incarnation here in Ann Arbor, St. Barnabas Episcopal Church in Chelsea, the Interfaith Center for Spiritual Growth in Ann Arbor, Temple Beth Emeth, and Beth Israel Congregation in Ann Arbor, St. Clair Episcopal. So those are our congregations to date. I've said a lot, and I will be happy to take your questions about anything I've said today, and then we'll get back to the burning questions a little bit.
What does Honduras have that we want?
What does Honduras have that we want?
Follow the money.
That we, they're strategically located, so they have geopolitical location. They had a coup in 2009 that overthrew a democratically elected president, And since then, and of course, again, by the military, and we were the only country in our hemisphere to recognize the coup. I'd like to say that that was okay. In all of the Americas, North and South. And then we built 6 more U.S. military bases
So
in
that's why we
Honduras.
like them, is because they're giving us land to put military bases.
And that we can keep our eye on everything from there. It's again strategically located, quick forward-moving bases and resources.
It's located between Brazil and Argentina.
Pardon me?
Is it located between Brazil and Argentina?
No, it's in Central America. Central America, so right on the isthmus, yeah. And I'm sorry, you had a question earlier.
I guess the question I had is, those who are in fear of deportation here are kind of long-standing, undocumented people, as opposed to those who have come now.
Both can be true, yes. What had happened at the border this summer that is unprecedented, it is both our own immigration law, U.S. immigration law, and international immigration law, that anyone who comes and seeks asylum, that they have a right to be heard, that we have to take them, do all the paperwork, and then, of course, they can't get a trial right away to see, a hearing right away. So then they are, the practice is that they are allowed to live and with permission in this country until their case comes to before a judge. What happened at the border this year is that people came, a lot of people came, especially from Honduras for these reasons, but from also El Salvador and Guatemala, where horrific violence is taking place. And they came by themselves, adults came, they came with their families, and they were turned away at the border. They were turned away by, they said, we want to seek asylum. They came. They didn't sneak across the border. They came to this is what you're supposed to do. And they said things like, we can't deal with you today. You go back to Mexico and come back another day. That was one of the things they did. Other things they did is to say, you can't seek asylum. If you insist on seeking asylum, then we're going to separate you from your kids and put the kids in detention. This is the kind of new reality we're facing. It's not been pretty before this, but it is getting worse. So yes, it could be them. We have had some of those, as you know, some of the families were reunited with their children, especially the young children, but not all. Some of those children were brought here to Michigan. They were and put in foster care in a big foster care organization in Grand Rapids. After the public outcry, and there really was a public outcry to see these children, young children, separated from their parents, the administration quickly said, oh, well, we're going to reunite all children and parents. They still have not, but many were reunited in a long, laborious process because they weren't really sure where and who belonged to whom, and it was a mess.
Did some of that deal with trafficking, where there was no parent? It was the undocumented person coming in with a child.
I have not heard of any cases of that. Anything is possible. But I think they would have heard of that.
Was saying that these were really just unrelated people bringing children across the border for money, but there was never any evidence to prove it. But I saw it.
Yeah, I have not heard that was true at that time. I did hear this morning that a group of people have started by foot from Honduras. And they're doing a caravan, but a walking caravan to the border. It is untenable to
Does Mexico provide any help for them along the way?
Unfortunately, the United States has a lot of influence with Mexico, and one of the things that they have done, again, since Obama's time, but very much carried forward in this administration, is that they have insisted that Mexico, at their border with Guatemala and Honduras, that they stop people and that they don't allow them to go forward. So it's difficult. Some church groups, yes, and some church groups have tried to do what they can for people who are migrating through Mexico, but it's, if they learn about them, if they see them. You may have heard about this train that called the Beast, La Bestia, that comes up through Mexico, and there are people along those stops who try to minister to folks, but no, there's not much. And you didn't ask this question, but I'll answer it. I'm pretty on top of what's going on in Honduras. I have been there several times in the last several years, and there is very little. When people do get deported back to Honduras, there is very, very little that is provided for them in any way. Some church group, but they can't do them all. And but the government, apparently, you get, and they told me this, you get a bag of cement and a bag of food when you come back as a deportee.
Cement or cases
To help you build something that you might live in.
I have a suggestion. So I happen to know a group of undocumented women who have been having all kinds of trouble. They live in Canton, so they're actually in Wayne County.
They live in Canton.
Okay. And one of my suggestions to them, because it's all about they don't have legitimate driver's licenses because they don't have social security numbers. And since they changed that at the driver's license place, you can no longer get a driver's license. So they get picked up because they look brown, and then they don't have a driver's license, and then the next phone call is to ICE. Mm-hmm. So my suggestion is they need to have white people driving them around. Is there anything where people volunteer to do that, or is there a number that they can call to get somebody to drive them around?
That's great. Did everyone hear? Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Yeah. Just to say that the police, part of the work of Wicker has been to work with the police here in Ann Arbor, Pittsfield Township, and Ypsilanti, and the Sheriff's Department for Washtenaw County. And all of them are not supposed to ask your immigration status if they make a traffic stop. They're prohibited by ordinances, at least in Ann Arbor and Ypsi. And the sheriff has pledged not to. So in Wayne County, this has happened. I mean, it doesn't mean it never happens here, but we have heard a lot in the Canton area. People who didn't have Social Security numbers used to be able to get driver's licenses so they could drive safely, legally, etc. Now, for many years, they are not able to. And so their licenses that they had get expired, and they're unable to drive legally. But think about yourselves, how you would get to work or anywhere without a car in here, in the Ann Arbor, Ypsi area. We don't do it, or very few of us do. And so in order to feed their families, they have to drive. So there is nothing organized in Washtenaw County for those kind of routine back and forth to work. I mean, that would take an army of people to do that. But very often people have to go to Detroit for some kind of hearing, or to, some people are on ankle monitors, like criminals, but who have permission to stay, but they have to check in and get their monitor checked in every week or so, and it has to be in Detroit. And so we do have people who drive them to those sensitive locations. but there isn't a cadre of people like that. In Canton, it could be well worth doing, but it might be better worth doing, or along with that, to talk with the folks who talk with the police here and try to get to the Canton police. And there is someone who works on those issues, and I can check that out. There was a thought of going out to Canton to talk with those police. But these are the kinds of, whether we have a family in sanctuary, like say at Zion Lutheran Church, or that Zion Lutheran Church is mobilizing and having teams of hospitality folks to help take care of the people who are in sanctuary at the Unitarian Church or so on. That is doing congregational sanctuary, but being sanctuary people is asking these questions like Sharon is, caring about when you find out about something like this and asking, what can we do, and then starting to mobilize around it. Even raising the consciousness of the Canton police that you don't have to do this. Ann Arbor doesn't, Ypsilanti doesn't, Washtenaw County doesn't. What's your reason for doing this? Why are you enforcing federal laws that you don't have to enforce? They are not required by federal law. So, thank you for that question. And yes, okay. You have listened for a long time. I'd be happy to come back anytime and talk on any of these topics. I'm trying to look at the burning questions just to see. We talked about the driving. I think we've heard something about what's happening locally with immigrants. I know very little about what's happening with human trafficking in the ways that that we think about it here in Washtenaw County. It has not come to my attention that it probably is a problem, and it may be. Human trafficking sometimes means prostitution, and I'm sure that happens here. But trafficking of human beings that are held sort of captive for working, and I haven't heard of any, so I don't know.
Actually, this area is like one of the worst internationally because of the border.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we're probably
In
getting
Detroit
illegally
area.
undocumented immigrants, and then they become, the main people getting hurt by all this.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a training guide at Washtenaw Community College about actually the Michigan area is a huge, huge problem.
Yeah.
And the Canton police actually, all the different local police organizations have actually had a police officer appointed full-time to the illegal trafficking task force. Yeah. So that might be a way to talk to the Canton Police Department.
Thank you.
Wasn't there a rate that they just released like 124 people in the last weekend?
But one police officer that came to talk about human trafficking is now in charge of security at Washtenaw Community College. So with him being on campus, having been from the Canton Police Department, he might be a good resource.
Good. You hear that, Sharon? Can I follow up on this one? Okay.
I don't trust myself to go and talk to the king.
I will help you.
I'll end up behind bars.
I'll go with you. It's not a bad thing sometimes to end up behind bars. Martin Luther King Jr. Was behind bars. So the worldwide refugee and immigrant absorbing cultural differences, how we can do that. Step by step, one step at a time, getting to know each other as part of the same human race, heart to heart, and appreciating each other's wonderful cultures, and doing that kind of sharing. That's my best answer for that. Thank you for your kind attention and for taking that.